好的，我们现在马上就透过视讯专访英国智库亨利杰克逊的学会执行董事艾伦门多萨博士。Now joining our program is Dr.艾伦门多萨of Henry Jackson Society in London. Good morning, Dr. Mendoza. Thank you for accepting my interview request. And
Good morning, Rebecca.
Good morning. Since the outbreak of COVID-19, Taiwan has been doing a very good job in combating and controlling the virus. Taiwan is willing to share its experience with the world and even donates facial masks to the EU and many other countries. So, what do you think is Europe's overall impression on Taiwan at this moment?
Well, I think it's a great point you've made, because Taiwan has really exploded onto the international sort of scene in terms of its response to COVID-19. It was obviously hit her very early on by the virus, given its proximity to China. But what was notable was, of course, that in a democracy, and that's a key part which I want to stress, in a democratic society, people pulled together, the government reacted quickly, and as a result, you controlled the virus very quickly, and you have been maintaining a good standard, obviously, of keeping it in check. Now, I think people noticed that early on. I think people were interested in the Taiwan model. It was cited extensively for several months as being an example of how, in a democratic society, you can impose certain health checks in order to sort of improve the health situation. And that, of course, makes Taiwan a very interesting case compared to some of the countries near you who are authoritarian in nature, and which would have a very different approach to solving, if you like, the coronavirus pandemic issue. But it's not something necessarily the West could adopt.
Yeah.
So what's interesting is that Taiwan, as a democracy, offers, or offered at least, an opportunity for people to go, well, this is how democratic societies can look at this. And certainly, internationally, Taiwan was recognized, I think, for its early and prompt action.
Yeah, so the Taiwanese government has tried very hard to promote the idea that Taiwan can help. And do you think that the public understanding now about Taiwan has increased? And what can Taiwan do to increase more its international recognition and participation?
Well, I think it's quite right to note that, of course, Taiwan has been a donor of PPE equipment. We here in the UK received surgical masks from Taiwan, which, of course, gratefully received at a time when we were facing a very difficult period against the pandemic. So I think, firstly, Taiwan, obviously being an international donor of sorts, is going to be helpful to your sort of foreign sort of profile and people understanding what exactly Taiwan is. Secondly, I think, just being present at, global gatherings where possible, and making use of your diplomatic assets is another great way of doing so. I mean, I must say, Taiwan punches well above its weight, if you like, in terms of its diplomatic representation. We know there are obviously issues in terms of formal recognition of Taiwan, but of course, informally, Taiwan has representation around the world, and it uses its diplomats very, very well. They're well known in their countries where they're posted. They are very active, and that obviously helps in terms of getting the message of Taiwan, a democracy like ours, in a very different part of the world with fairly difficult pressures upon it, but still trying to maintain liberty, freedom, human rights in that kind of aspect. And I think the more that Taiwan can show its normality, its by Western sort of kind of standards, its sort of approach to human life and dignity, which it does with dramatic fashion, and its modernity, I think you'll find that more and more people will, of course, be interested in the Taiwanese story. But there is another corollary to this, and I'm sure we'll come on to it. I think Taiwan's prominence has increased as the issue of China has hoved into view in the West as being a major threat. And once that occurred in this period, people started looking around the region and going, hang on, there's Taiwan, which has been under threat for some time. Mm-hmm. This country we need to know a bit more about it as well. So there's like a push and pull factor going on here as well.
Yeah, talking about threat from China. Okay, despite strong objection from China, Speaker of the Czech Senate just led a large delegation to Taiwan, and in his speech at Taiwan's parliament, he even stated that he was Taiwanese, channeling the late U.S. President John F. Kennedy's defiance of communism in Berlin in 1963. So what do you make of this?
Well, I think, look, you're getting lots of people around the world, including obviously our Czech representative here, who feel strongly that Taiwan should not be ignored on the world stage. There's been a tendency, I think we all know, that the games that have been played between China and Taiwan to Taiwan's detriment, where China ruthlessly goes after countries who are interested in sort of recognition of Taiwan, strong ties that way. And on the one hand, look, I understand this. We all know it's a very vexed question. We know that the future of Taiwan should really be determined by the Taiwanese people, not by what China wants or frankly, what we in the West want. It's really what you in Taiwan want that matters in that debate. And until such time as Taiwan's people make a decision to go one way or the other in a definitive fashion, I think it's incumbent upon everyone to make sure as many options are open to Taiwan as Taiwan would like. And part of that, of course, involves creating links politically, diplomatically, culturally, economically, all those things that reflect that Taiwan is a normal functioning country, even if there is some uncertainty, if you like, about its ultimate status and how it should operate. There are other countries in the world where there are those questions as well. That doesn't stop them from operating fully on the international scene. And I think Taiwan has proven its worth as a partner for its regional neighbours, for its neighbours further afield in this period, and that should be recognised by the international community going forwards.
Okay, so do you foresee in the future there will be more exchanges between the UK and Taiwan? And is it possible for the UK to send high-ranking officials to visit Taiwan?
Well, that is always a difficult question because of the nature of recognition. I mean, if a country is not formally recognised, you have a certain limitation. But look, politicians have been many times to Taiwan. We've had leading politicians come to Taiwan from the UK. We've had business delegations. We've had cultural exchanges. And those go quite far down. I mean, even people as sort of limited in stature as myself have visited Taiwan on account of, of outreach by Taiwan to say, come and see us, come and understand what we are, basically. And I think that helps. I think the very fact that when you take people to a country so they understand it firsthand, you get a dramatically different sense of it from what might be the case from newspapers or the media. There's nothing like seeing a country firsthand, and so I would personally encourage as many people to visit Taiwan as possible, because then you will begin to understand it's a very unique place in its region.
So can you foresee where the UK invite Taiwanese cabinet officials, even the president, to the UK due to her close ties with the UK, and will you make this kind of suggestion to the British government?
Well, I'm happy to suggest that to the British government. I mean, look, I think we've seen past Taiwanese presidents visit the US. The US, of course, doesn't formally recognize Taiwan. We know the game again on that basis. If the Taiwanese president can visit the USA, there's no reason the Taiwanese president cannot visit the UK, particularly a Taiwanese president who likes the UK. This is always a key, sort of part of this as well. And I think, diplomacy operates on many different levels, and there are many ways that someone can come, make a visit to a country. And I don't think it should be too difficult beyond the realms of the finest minds of the Foreign Office here in the UK to come up with a way that the Taiwanese president might be able to visit a university, say, something like that, just as has occurred in the US case, and then, has a visit to the UK at the same time. So it would seem to me a sensible approach, particularly given we in Britain now are very keen on promoting our trade links in Asia, given the impending Brexit that means that our trade policy is opening up again.
Yeah, so do you think more and more European countries will show their support to Taiwan despite China's objection? Is it possible?
Well, look, I think people have woken up to what China is up to in its region, let alone anywhere else, basically. I think for some time now, you knew it, for a long time. China has regional ambitions. It wants to ensure that the South China Sea is its lake, basically, and beyond. Look, and I get that. This is a rational policy choice from China's perspective, and China is not following anything unusual by doing so. But just because it's rational for China does not mean it's rational for Taiwan or South Korea or Japan, or indeed for the UK, the US, Western Europe, and other countries that way. Let's be frank, the peace in the region has been maintained for the last 70 years because freedom of navigation, because of an understanding that no one party, no one country in the region should dominate it. The US has guaranteed the security of ships, of people in that sort of way. And as a result, it really is incumbent, I think, upon the international community to ensure that the pressure some of our democratic allies are feeling in the East Asia region is alleviated by support from Western powers. Now, what form that takes could be many ways, but I think everyone is very aware now of China's regional ambitions. We've seen, of course, and here's a particular focus and threat to Taiwan.
Just right after the visit of the Czech delegation, Taiwan's President Tsai indicated that Taiwan hopes to sign a bilateral investment agreement, BIA, with the EU. So do you have any suggestions in how can the EU and Taiwan deepen the trade ties?
Well, I mean, obviously the UK is leaving the EU, so I speak of this now as a semi-outsider. We don't have any say anymore in EU policy. But of course, look, the British case always was, in the EU, make as many trade deals as possible. Free trade is good. It promotes sort of obviously economic growth. It promotes relations between countries. It would seem to me an obvious case, given Taiwan is an industry leader in certain sort of key industries, semiconductors, things like that. And by the way, these are things that are strategically important to countries in the West. We need to have security of supply in the West of some of these issues. The Henry Jackson Society, for example, produced a report earlier this year about the security of supply lines. Now, we covered the Five Eyes countries, I mean, so the UK, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, and the US. But actually it refers the same way to Europe, in a sense. It's looking at security of our supplies for key areas in homeland security. And given Taiwan's electronic prowess in particular, the sort of, given your focus on innovation there, it would seem to me the Europeans ought to take seriously Taiwan as a supplier of key components for national security-related industries, and make sure they tie up a secure supply, so they're not reliant on authoritarian countries for supply.
Yeah. Dr. Mendoza, this year, Taiwan has gained much more international attention than ever before. So what do you think are the major reasons? Do you think it's because of the Taiwan's efforts in combating the pandemic, or is it because of Taiwan's pursuit for freedom and democracy, so let the EU, US, and European countries show their support for Taiwan?
Well, I think it is definitely the response to the pandemic. That was early. That of course, as I said earlier, did make a big difference in terms of the perception of Taiwan and put Taiwan on the map as a place which wasn't just admired for its commitment to liberty and democracy, but actually was admired because of its response to a health pandemic in a liberal democracy as well. So, that I think Taiwan should be very proud of. The second issue, yes, of course, people are aware of Taiwan's sort of unique status. But again, this does come back, I'm afraid, to perceptions of China. I think the Chinese have done more in the last 8 months to ruin their international position than anyone could ever have imagined. Firstly, of course, their response to the pandemic and how they allowed it essentially to escape from China to the outside world because of their negligence, knowing full well what they were facing, and they suppressed the information, as we well know. Secondly, of course, then the wolf warrior diplomacy, as it's known, this sort of saber rattling that made people look around the region and go, well, who else is China threatening? And of course, everyone went on Taiwan and looked then at Taiwan and its commitments and went, well, this is a country that we should look at. Then, of course, let's not forget the infamous World Health Organization incident when Taiwan, despite its amazing record on coronavirus, was snubbed by the World Health Organization, and it appeared obvious that politics had pervaded the very highest echelons of the United Nations, and meant that people were not looking at the health pandemic from a health perspective, but from a political perspective, which was clearly being driven by China's agenda there. And I think that, of course, helped people realize that Taiwan is being cold-shouldered and being sort of bullied almost by its large neighbor. And I think people like bullies in general, and I think that perception has helped, realize. And then, of course, the Hong Kong issue as well has refocused attention on Taiwan as well, given the prospective fate that awaits Taiwan should it ever be part of one country, two systems as well. So all those factors have come together to, I think, again, like I mentioned earlier, explode Taiwan onto the international scene in a way that it hasn't been for some time.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr.艾伦 Mendoza, for your insights and views, and we hope we will have more and more chance to learn your views in the future. Thank you very much, and have a good day.
Thank you. You too.